on, everybody? Welcome back to the Liberation Hour here once again on YouTube. Really, once again, just appreciate everybody for tuning in. Crazy, we're already at episode 4. Again, feels like so much has gone on in the world really over these last few weeks. And happy to be back here once again because there's a lot of stuff still going on that I'll be getting into today. Yeah, just anybody who's tuning in, really appreciate it if you guys would just subscribe or like. I know we've gotten a lot of views the first few videos, and I've appreciated a lot of the support, heard a lot of good things in person and over social media about it, and I appreciate everybody's kind comments. But again, we got another jam-packed show today, and I'm happy to be joined once again by another guest, and it's going to be Mr. Josh Von Pohle. We're going to be talking about a couple of things today. Josh, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I know that we've, whether it's over, Instagram or in person, we're always talking about stuff, in and out of the political world, sports world, and stuff. And we always have, great discussions on stuff. So I'm glad you were able to come on. And I'm going to go ahead and actually just jump right into it here. We're going to go ahead and go over the main issue that I wanted to talk about today, which has to do with prison labor, and just mainly because of something that I've seen has just been kind of increasing more and more in states across this country. So I want to bring up a couple of articles here. Here's a couple of articles from the AP that talk about it. Prisoners in the United States are part of a hidden workforce linked to hundreds of popular food brands. A hidden path to America's dinner plates begins here at an unlikely source, a former Southern slave plantation that is now the country's largest maximum security prison. Unmarked trucks packed with prison-raised cattle roll out of the Louisiana State Penitentiary, where men are sentenced to hard labor and forced to work for pennies an hour or sometimes nothing at all. After rumbling down a country road to an auction house, the cows are brought by a local rancher and then followed by the Associated Press another 600 miles to a Texas slaughterhouse that feeds into the supply chains of giants like McDonald's, Walmart, and Cargill. Intricate invisible webs just like this one link some of the world's largest food companies and most popular brands to jobs performed by U.S. prisoners nationwide, according to a sweeping 2-year AP investigation into prison labor that tied hundreds of millions of dollars worth of agricultural products to goods sold on the open market. Now, there's plenty of other jobs that prisoners are forced to work as well, but I wanted to get into this because I've heard some people that have brought up a lot things about the Constitution, and one of the biggest one of arguably the most important amendments to the Constitution since the founding of our country is the 13th Amendment, which bans slavery and involuntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime. And that's where you kind of have the catch when it comes to stuff like this here. Some prisoners work on the same plantation soil where slaves harvested cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane more than 150 years ago, with some present day images looking eerily similar to the past. And the thing with this, too, is that basically prisoners are forced to do so, or else they are, you know, punished for not doing so. And here's another example of another article that kind of talks about that as well. Ben Sanchez was nearing the end of a 20-year stretch in an Arizona prison when he was leased out to work at Hickman Family Farms, which sells eggs that have ended up in supply chains of huge companies such as McDonald's, Target, and Albertsons. Well assigned to a machine that turns chicken droppings into compost, his right leg got pulled into the chute with a large spiraling auger. So basically, his leg got completely munched, and he had to have his leg amputated below the knee. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners are forced to work every year, some of whom end up being seriously injured or killed after being given dangerous jobs with little or no training. They include fighting wildfires. There's been a lot of prisoners in California who helped out with fighting some of the crazy wildfires we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years. They also operate heavy machinery or work on industrial-sized farms and meat processing plants, such as the last article I brought up that tie to other supply chains just like McDonald's. So this kind of gets into what I was talking about because in many states we've seen that this has kind of soared over the years, and I wanted to get into the this part of it right here. Prisoners across the country can be sentenced to hard labor, forced to work, and punished if they refuse, including being sent to solitary confinement. They cannot protest against poor conditions, and it's usually difficult for them to sue. Most jobs are inside prisons where inmates typically earn a few cents an hour doing things like laundry and mopping floors. The limited outside positions often pay minimum wage, but some states deduct up to 60% off the top. And one of those states actually is Florida right here. And this is another article I want to bring up from The Guardian. Most incarcerated people still work for free in the Sunshine State. And yeah, so food service provider Aramark runs a prison program called Into Work that hasn't been paying prisoners for the work they've been doing for the company. The work includes making premium meals that family and friends can purchase for their loved ones in prison. Julius Smith, 36, entered the Florida state prison system at the age of 18 in 2008, said the state of affairs was all too common. If we don't do the work, then the prison does not operate, said Smith, who is currently in prison in Florida. I feel like people who go to prison should be paid like other people in states where they work. If inmates got paid, they could take care of themselves instead of resorting to extreme measures to get the things that they need. Into Work was supposed to be giving inmates jobs. They said inmates were supposed to be paid for the work, but this program has been running half a year and not one inmate has been paid. So I just kind of wanted to bring this up here because we talk a lot about the prison system in this country. We talk a lot about how the incarceration rates are, and this is another thing that can be brought up is that we have one of the highest incarceration rates across the world. The United States actually imprisons more people than any country in the world. That includes China, Brazil, India, and others, and they have the sixth highest rate of incarceration behind El Salvador, Cuba, Rwanda, Turkmenistan, and American Samoa, according to World Population Review. And a lot of crimes that we see people that end up going to prison for, I'd say roughly half of them, from what I've seen, end up being victimless crimes, such as nonviolent drug offenses, or such as things like prostitution, things that really are just made illegal but aren't don't necessarily have a victim involved with them. Also, a couple other stats I want to bring up before we dive in a little bit deeper into this. Prison labor report survey from the ACLU found that 70% of inmates were not able to afford basic necessities with their prison wages. 64% said they felt concerned about their safety while working. 70% say that they received no formal job training, and 76% report being forced to work or face additional punishment. That is also a Bureau of Justice survey as well. So, Josh, I kind of want to bring you in on this here because I think that there's a lot of issues with our prison system here in this country, and I think a lot of people, when they hear about this issue, they might think, oh, there's a lot of violent prisoners that at the end of the day, who cares about them? If we're forcing them to do something, who cares? They've already basically forfeited their rights because of what they've done. But you also have a lot of people that go to prison for 15 to 20 years for non-violent offenses such as marijuana in some states. Of course, we're seeing a lot of states now that are making that at least legal and medicinally. But basically, like I was saying, nonviolent drug offenses. So overall, what's your take on this issue? Do you think that there's something that we could do to solve that? And what do you think could change on the policy end on that front?
That's actually some of that's news to me is them being forced to go to these farms to work for them for these big corporations. Because I know I'm pretty sure all of our prisons are for profit. So that just kind of makes you think like, why is this happening to our systems that are they're just designed to make money at the end of the day. So I believe the change needs to be made there. We need to change. Prison should not be for profit, but as it's such a big problem to tackle in America. That's got to be like one of our main issues that we are dealing with that creates so much mental problems, I guess, in this country. But a
Yeah,
way to change it, I think any system, I think anything could be changed for the better, especially if it's a victimless crime. Like we can solve these issues. How to do it though? I'm not too sure. I have not done enough research into the prison system to know exactly how it could be changed, but I know we could be doing something better.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the private prisons issue because, according to the Sentencing Project, as of February earlier this year, 27 states and the federal government have incarcerated nearly 91,000 people in private prisons. That was back a study done that was back in 2022. That represents 8% of the total state and federal prison population. And just to expand on some of those victimless crimes as well, of course, there are some that, in my opinion, well, there's maybe not a victim, they aren't things that should just be allowed for sure, such as public drunkenness, for example. Um, you know, possession of, I would say, certain kinds of weapons. I'm much more of a pro Second Amendment kind of person, but I think that there are certain kinds of weapons that still probably should not be in the hands of people. And depending on, if they're armed in a certain way with that, then maybe you can consider that in a way. But like things like prostitution, for example, assisted suicide, trespassing, even stuff like that, gambling, in certain states, there, gambling in certain ways can be illegal. And I think that, well, there certainly are some of these prisoners that are doing, some of this, labor and, getting injured or not getting paid for the work that they are doing. I think that there's a lot more people that are going to prison in this country for crimes that they should not be going to prison for. I'm happy to see in some cases, like on the drug front, that we have seen advances in that. Of course, here in California this year, the state fair actually had a cannabis exhibit for the first time, which was really cool to see. I was there. I know you were as well. Um, and so you're starting to see, progression on certain things like that. But I would argue at the same time that it seems like on other fronts we're kind of seeing steps back. Unfortunately, even though I think there's a contingent of a growing amount of libertarians that are on the right that want to see smaller government. Unfortunately, you also have some people that are on the extreme right that also want to see things like porn banned across some certain states and stuff like that. And I think that in this country, having more laws on the books against things that are nonviolent is only going to crowd up the prisons and make it harder to go after the people that actually are committing violent crimes, and will lead to a lot more crimes on the streets from people that we might not even know who they are.
Very true. Also, I believe most or pretty much everybody deserves a second chance, even like violent. If you murder somebody, obviously there's it's going to take a lot of rehabilitation for that person. But anybody besides pedophiles, I believe, should be given a second chance.
Yeah, and that's a thing too. Is we put, I think, a lot of money towards incarcerating people in this country that we really don't need to be. And I think that we could solve the issue of actually going after more pedophile rings, or we could solve the issue of going after more human rights abusers, or people that just traffic human beings here, there, and everywhere. I think we could put a lot more focus into our systems of going after those kinds of people if we didn't have some of the laws on the books that we have now and actually focused on that. But again, I think, as you kind of mentioned, as I brought up, I think, while it's a small amount proportionately to the rest of the country and the public sphere, private prisons definitely, when it comes to the money side of things, probably play a role in some of that, along with some companies such as, like, tobacco companies when it's come to, things like marijuana as well.
Yeah, very true.
Um, but that was pretty much one of the big things I wanted to talk about on that front, because I think there's a lot of things that could be solved on that issue, and I wanted to bring that into the light since that's not something I really see talked about a lot. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is actually something that's come out over the last couple of days, we have actually been seeing, it's election year, not just here in America, but there's elections going on really across the world right now. And one of the big countries that just had an election was Venezuela, and there have been protests and riots in Venezuela following the election of Nicolas Maduro. I'll go ahead and share this article for anybody on here, so give me one sec while I pull this up. This is also from the AP. Venezuela's Maduro asked top court to audit the presidential election, but observers cried foul. President Nicolas Maduro on Wednesday asked Venezuela's high court to conduct an audit of the presidential election after opposition leaders disputed his claim of victory, drawing criticism from foreign observers who said the court is too close to the government to produce an independent review. Maduro told reporters that the ruling party is also ready to show all the vote tally sheets from Sunday's election. Quote, "I throw myself before justice," he said outside the Supreme Tribunal of Justice headquarters in the capital, Caracas, adding that he is willing to be summoned, questioned, and investigated. This is Maduro's first concession to demands for more transparency about the election. However, the court is closely aligned with his government. The court's justices are proposed by federal officials and ratified by the National Assembly, who is dominated by Maduro sympathizers. And that actually kind of leads me into the next article that I wanted to bring up here. This one is from Reuters that talks a little bit about the dives a little bit deeper into the opposition. Venezuela opposition says its victory is irreversible, citing 73% of vote tallies. Venezuela opposition leader Maria Corina Machado said on Monday the country's opposition has 73.2% of the voting tallies from Sunday's election, allowing it to prove election results. It says give it a victory. But then we actually go down here a little bit, and the tallies in the possession of the opposition showed a total of 2.75 million votes for Maduro and 6.27 million for his rival, former diplomat Edmundo Gonzalez. The numbers were sharply different to the 5.15 million votes the Electoral Authority said Maduro had won, compared to 4.45 million for Gonzalez. And, I think that, this kind of brings up an interesting point because, there's a lot of different nations across the world that, have more authoritarian leaders in some senses, like, Russia, for example, that, say that the election goes one way, but I think a lot of people know that, there's a good chance that, some of that is distorted or some of that is rigged. Of course, people are still to this day, there's a lot of conversation over the 2020 election here. You could really go back to elections as far back as 2000. People, will say that there, could have been much more, there could have been a better process in terms of verifying those kinds of elections. And you're seeing people that are really starting to rise up against Maduro over in Venezuela. And it's also important to note, though, at the same time, while some people see Maduro as more of, an authoritarian kind of leader, he is the left-wing leader of Venezuela. There also are many sanctions that get imposed to Venezuela from the United States of America. And this actually goes back to, the Trump administration and the Obama administration against the Maduro government. The United States has turned to economic sanctions as a means of pressuring the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro. This is from El Pais International. This was back in April. On Thursday, Washington reactivated the restrictions on Venezuela's oil sector that it had lifted 6 months ago. The move came after opposition candidates such as Maria Corina Machado were disqualified from running for president. This means that the so-called General License 44, which allowed Venezuela to sell its gas and crude oil in international markets, will not be renewed, but U.S. pressure, which has intensified ahead of the July 28th presidential elections in Venezuela, is nothing new. It spans 3 White House administrations and has become progressively more complicated. And so I wanted to bring all this up here because, we're obviously entering an election here in the United States that I'm sure is going to see, regardless of what the results are on either side, a lot of pushback, and is going to be probably, hotly contested even after the results come in. And this right here, I think, is a taste of potentially something that we might even see here in November. And it's interesting because Venezuela is a country that I think, a lot of people talk about, the economic issues that it has had over the last decade. Of course, like I just mentioned, the U.S. has a role to play with that. But just, on your take of just, the election in general and how it kind of relates to things that we've seen over the last few years, do you feel the world in general has kind of just rose up against, the establishment in a way and wanting to see change and don't feel necessarily that elections are getting it done? Just overall, what's your take on that, related to the United States issue, related to other issues across the world in nations like Venezuela?
So, I mean, just over my lifetime, I've seen a dramatic drop in the trust for government. Like, I remember my parents telling me when I was growing up, like, we shouldn't trust government. Government doesn't want to help us. And I kind of we grew up with social media. So I got a different viewpoint than them because they weren't seeing the same stuff I was. So I kind of I trusted the government more than I should have growing up. And I feel like a lot of people are, and you're starting to see this shift now in at least America of people waking up to the idea that our government isn't here to help us. So with that in mind, you look at our elections, in 2020, people are already saying it's rigged, and I could see how people are saying that. I don't believe it was directly like ballot stuffing was the what was happening. I think in a more of a rigged type thing is the media controlling everybody's opinions on what was happening. Because you look at like right now what's happening, you type in on Google Trump rally, and it pulls up every bad thing that it'll pull up like Kamala Trump rally, and like if everything Trump has said at his rally is bad about Kamala, and then you go and type in on Google Kamala rally, and it only pulls up positive things about Kamala. So it's like that in a way is rigging an election. So in order to get that trust back, I think we need to secure our elections in a way that people will trust. So to do that, I mean, look, we have IDs for pretty much everything else. It's like, why are we not giving our ID to go vote?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people too that have just talked about the primary in general and the process for the Democratic primary and how there should have been a vote for Democratic voters across the country after Biden dropped out to actually choose who the nominee was going to be.
Yeah.
Because at this point we already are seeing polls where Kamala's made a huge swing and there's been a lot of funding going her way, and a lot of people are hitting on Trump because he's saying he's not going to vote Kamala, or sorry, he's not going to debate Kamala, I should say. And in some ways, I can definitely understand people hitting on that because of how he hit on Biden and how he debated him, but now not being willing to debate the other person. But at the same time, I can also see the other side of it of people saying, why would he accept a debate against somebody who's not even the nominee yet if they haven't had the convention until late August? So it's an interesting issue there for sure. And the reason I wanted to just bring up this on the election front is because Venezuela isn't the only other country we're seeing this in. Bolivia, another country out that's in South America, foiled a military coup attempt back in June as the president Luis Arce thwarted it, and his army general Juan Jose Zuniga was arrested, but they basically were able to qualm things and everything ended up working out. The one thing that I worry about, and the one thing that does scare me on the other side of the aisle when it comes to the election here in America, and I wanted to get your take on this. There was a rally earlier this week. Can't remember exactly where it was off the top of my head, but basically Trump was talking to his supporters, but a lot of them, being religious and a lot of them being Christian. And I'm sure you heard this where he said, you're not going to have to vote again, after, I get in there. Now, I think that people look at this from two different sides. You could look at it from the side of him saying that I'm going to clean things up to where, Christians don't have, vote in large numbers. So you're not going to have to worry about it because I'm not going to basically be running again. So you vote for me after that, things will be solved and I'll take care of it. But also there's some people that are interpreting that in the way of, you're not going to have to vote again because basically I'm going to make sure there's not another election. I'm just going to take over as another kind of leader. Overall, just, what's your take on, what Trump said on that? And overall, just, Trump in general, it seems like that, he makes a lot of these points, but doesn't necessarily explain himself in some ways, which in some ways can be used to an advantage for him, but in some ways can hurt him when it comes to polls.
Yeah, I see most of the things Trump say in my eyes hurts him in because like people are just going to clip it and put it out there, and then it's going to take a few days for his army to come in and counteract the whatever they're saying happened. So it's people just have to take they have to take the last 4 years of what they've heard about Trump for the most part and just kind of push it aside and just start looking at him as a new person, because I don't think Trump is this Hitler type person that everybody paints that the media has painted him to be. So I don't see him those words that he said in that rally as he's gonna take over the government and there's not gonna be any more elections after that. What I think he meant by that, and I was raised Christian. I believe in the Christian values and what they and Jesus Christ and all that, but I don't necessarily preach it like most Christians do. It's just like if you believe it, you believe it. If you don't, you don't. But Trump, I just think Trump's going to be only bad for corrupt people that have been using our political system for their own good.
Um, you mentioned a point there talking about the media painting out Trump to be this Hitler type character. Just to extract go off of that and talk about the division in this country. A lot of people always talk about, oh, we're so divided. Well, I think a big problem is you have a lot of people that are on the left, on the left that would say Trump is basically like Hitler. When I think there's a lot of people that compare people and compared a lot of people over time to Hitler, and it's in reality to try to paint somebody in the most negative way possible, when in reality people the history of it and understanding what a Hitler character did. I think it really kind of diminishes the evil and the horror that Hitler
Yeah,
did back
exactly.
in the 30s and the 40s. But on the flip side, obviously you have people also on the right that try to paint Democrats as Marxists, and you try to paint people like Nancy
Oh
Pelosi,
yeah,
Vladimir
100%.
Lenin, stuff like that. So I think it hurts both ways when you have people that paint the one side or in this country to be out to be the most extreme side or
Hmm.
person out there from history. And I think a lot of it is because I don't think a lot of people really know about these characters or know about history enough to really make a counterpoint to that. But there's parties that are way further left than the Democrats out there in this country that exist. There's parties that are way further right than the Republicans out there in this country that exist. Sure, have the parties maybe shifted in some ways further down their sides when it comes to certain issues? Of course, but I think that we do a major disservice to the voting populace when we compare these figures to historical figures of the past that committed just horrific atrocities that are unworldly that we haven't seen in forever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Trump, if I hope if he does win, I hope if he ends up becoming the, I don't hope he becomes this, but if he does becomes this like dictator type person, I hope the people that put him in power stand up against him.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening.
I'm definitely interested to see where the election goes. I think anything can happen from here. I think personally, right now we're in uncharted territories. I think a lot of people can make comparisons back to 2016 and 2020 with the numbers and how Trump maybe outperformed them. Of course, right now we've seen Kamala's had a huge surge. I think there's still potential for her to either get a bigger surge or Trump to come back. I think there's a lot of states right now that are in play. I know we've had some disagreements on this. I think the election is going to be a lot closer than I think people on either side may realize right now. And I think that we're in for a very interesting season. I think the DNC is going to be a show for sure. I think if they do have an election between the two of them, that's going to be very telling. And I think that's going to have a big impact. I think there's still a lot of things that can sway this election. And again, I think regardless what happens, unfortunately, we have the precedent of, there's going to be people on either side that are, going to want to fight back regardless of what the results are for sure.
There's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as bad as Venezuela, obviously, but there's going to be chaos.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I had to get your thought on this, and I wanted to ask you this on here because you're a golfer like me, and I've wanted to ask somebody this question for quite some time. So I'm sure, as you know, that there's going to be it's either in 2026 or 2028. There's going to be that a big golf ball rollback where there's going to be basically the golf balls are going to travel approximately 15 yards shorter than they do for the current crop. They're going to be not necessarily flight restricted, but there's going to be a big change. The USGA and the RNA has announced that a few months ago. I just wanted to get your take. What's your thought on that? Because obviously, we see players, they hit the ball today 350, 360 yards, and sure, the ball might go a little bit shorter for them, but it really feels like this is going to hurt more of like the daytime golfers, like guys like me and you, that just want to go out there and play for fun. And in reality, while Tiger's done a great job of growing the game, it feels like that we could, use a little bit of momentum and some juice to go back and grow the game a little bit more again, too.
So I think they need to keep it to just if you're trying to play towards a professional level of golf, you should be using those conforming balls because I mean, 6 months ago, I probably would have said I don't like this idea because I don't hit my driver, or I wasn't hitting my driver over 300 yards at the time. But with the practice I've had lately and the distance I've gained, I could see why they want to do this, because you look at most of the golf courses in the United States, they're pretty much all under 7,500 yards from the tips. It's like you're getting guys that play these courses, they're hitting driver wedge into every hole, and that's not how golf was meant to be played. So I totally understand why they want to do that. It's to get the game back to its roots more. But for the average player, they should be able to still buy the best ball. Like the current Pro V1 right now should not be discontinued. It should be continued to be made, and they necessarily don't have to keep spending more money on research and development to better the ball. Like, it's already as good as it needs to be. So just continue making that ball for the average player. But there's definitely some room in there for a rollback for the professionals.
Yeah, I think my biggest argument just when it comes to this issue is that while the golf ball obviously plays a significant role, that we've seen incredible technological advances when it comes to just equipment over the last 20 to 25 years as well. I would argue that, just equipment and how much better that has gotten has played probably a bigger role in people being able to hit the ball further than even the golf ball has.
The shafts are the
Yeah.
biggest thing, I think, because especially when you find the right shaft that fits you, and the spin rate and everything works, the ball, whatever ball you're using, really isn't going to matter unless it's just feels like a rock. But most high end golf balls are pretty good. But yeah, I don't know.
It's going to be something that'll be interesting to see how it affects the tour for sure. But no, I am sorry to anybody out there who's watching and wasn't watching for that. But that's our golf nerd talk. I had to ask Josh about that because we've played for quite some time. But no, Josh, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, chatting about these couple things. Just there's a lot of important things going on right now in the world, and I appreciate you spending some time out of your evening to chat with me and talk about some of this stuff for sure.
Yes, sir. I definitely have to do some more research on that prison stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had no idea they were using prisoners to legit fund big corporations' profits.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how far things go with some corporations in this country for sure. But yeah, man, thank you very much. I'll be talking with you again soon, dude.
Sweet, sounds good. Have a good
Yeah,
night.
take care. All right, so that was Josh Von Pohle. Thank you, Josh, so much for coming on and chatting. Appreciate him for taking some time and talking about a couple of those issues we talked about earlier, such as the protests in Venezuela and how it kind of affects just how we've seen elections really, just be contested all over across the world, and of course the prison labor and the prison system. Again, I recommend anybody go out there and do your own research on that. I think that's a very important issue that we're going to be seeing a lot more of, in the coming months and coming years. I wanted to talk about a couple of more things that are pressing right now, one of which has to do with Israel. I know I talked in pretty big depth about this issue with my friend Kendrick a few weeks ago, and this is an issue, and of course I'm wearing my ceasefire shirt. This is an issue that I will be bringing up at times for sure because there are consistently new news about it, but there's obviously a lot of things that are going on in this country and across the world, so it's not something I plan on touching on every week, but this week, two huge things that went on. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. This is an article from CNN from yesterday. Israel says its Beirut strike killed Hezbollah's top military commander, who it blames for Golan Heights attack. Israel said its strike in Lebanon on Tuesday killed Hezbollah's top senior military commander. In a statement, the IDF said that the Israeli Air Force fighter jets eliminated the Hezbollah terrorist organization's most senior military commander, Fuad Shakur. Hezbollah and Lebanese authorities have not yet confirmed the death. Since then, he has been confirmed dead. At least 3 people were killed in the Israeli airstrike targeting a Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. 74 people were injured, according to the Lebanese health ministry. The health ministry said 2 children and a woman were killed in the strike. Lebanese media reported that. The injured, including some with serious wounds, have been taken to nearby hospitals. According to earlier reporting from Lebanese state news agency NNA. IDF Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Hezbollah has crossed the red line in a social media post minutes after the Israeli military claimed responsibility for the retaliatory strike on Tuesday. The Iran-backed group has denied being behind the Golan Heights strike 3 days earlier. So there was a huge strike that happened in the Golan Heights, which used to be Syrian territory that Israel has since occupied. And there've been a lot of reports on that I've seen, and this is why I don't want to, I don't want to speculate too much or claim anything to be true. But I have seen reports that some people believe that it was the Iron Dome that malfunctioned, and missiles actually from Israel that actually went up in the sky and ended up falling back on those cities in the Golan Heights. Again, that's something I think is going to take an investigation. We might not know for some time, just like it took a little bit of time to learn a little bit more about October 7th, and things were a lot more complicated than media made it out to be with that issue. And of course, the number of casualties changed on that throughout months. But this isn't the only thing that we have seen over the last day or two. There have also been another huge thing that happened over the last day as well, as Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh killed in Iran. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed that Haniyeh and one of his bodyguards have been killed in a strike on their residence in Tehran, where the Hamas leader had participated in the inauguration ceremony of new President Masoud Pezeshkian. So this is an article from NBC News. He was killed early Wednesday in the Iranian capital, according to Iran and the Palestinian militant group, both of which blamed Israel for an attack that has raised fears of spiraling conflict in the region. Haniyeh, 62, was assassinated in Tehran after he attended the inauguration ceremony. Mentioned that earlier. Haniyeh, who, quote, died as a result of a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence in Tehran, according to a Hamas statement on Telegram, was also a senior negotiator in ceasefire talks with Israel. We'll get into that here in a second. So his death could imperil negotiations aimed at ending the war in the Gaza Strip and ensuring the return of hostages held in the enclave. Yeah, that's the big thing about this is there were reports a couple of months ago that Haniyeh was willing to go have a two-state solution on 1967 borders and lay down all of their arms. And Israel would not accept that. He also, was willing to do a prisoner swap. This is a very tough issue because there's going to be people out there that are going to say, oh, this guy, is a terrorist. You don't work with terrorists. There's also going to be people out there though that say, hey, if you want things to change, you are going to have to work with your enemy. And right now, it really feels like that the Israeli government, and specifically Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have really just continued this war and are trying to really escalate things in that region. Because Netanyahu knows that when the war is over, his political career is done because of all the corruption charges that he has had over the last over multiple years, actually. And also at the same time, he knows he can drag the U.S. into another regional war in the Middle East, which will only help his cause. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Biden does in response to this. It's going to be interesting depending on what happens with the election. If there are still tensions in the Middle East, what Kamala Harris or Donald Trump will do. I've already seen an interview that Trump did with Laura Ingraham where Trump said, if you're a Jewish person and you vote for a Democrat, you're basically a self-hating person because they've done more to hate the state of Israel than anybody, which is quite honestly laughable. When you look at all of the weapons and the money that we have given them since October 7th. But this is a very important thing because it's going to define really where we go from here in terms of the escalation on this issue, and if we get involved in a bigger conflict, and if it leads to a huge war. I'm hoping not. I really have, all I can do is remain hopeful over in this region of the world, and donate to certain causes. But all we can do is continue to pressure leaders to call for a ceasefire and to really call for an end of the arms over to the state of Israel, so that that we kind of forced their hand, because we're their main supplier when it comes to all this stuff, is forcing their hand to get a ceasefire and end all this craziness. And none of our taxpayer dollars deserve to be going towards this. We have much more pressing matters and important matters in our own country with our own people than we do over in this region of the world. So I will remain hopeful, but I needed to give that update to everybody who's tuning in because, it's going to be interesting to see where we go from here. Kind of just wanted to bring up some polls here for everybody as well. Just wanted to touch on a couple things before we get going for the day. It's gonna be a little bit of a shorter episode than usual. I'm going on vacation tomorrow, so wanted to kind of keep this a little bit shorter, especially since last week was basically a 2-hour show. These are some polls from as early as yesterday, and really all of this we're seeing a blue wave of Kamala in some of these polls. We've had a lot of Bloomberg polls that have come out, but this one right here, general election in a five-way against Trump, RFK, Jill Stein, and Cornel West. Kamala Harris up 246 to 44 over Trump. Again, that is an Economist YouGov poll. She's up 4 in New Hampshire in the latest poll, up 7 in New Hampshire poll with all 5 candidates. She's even up 2 now in Arizona, which is huge, tied in Georgia. That's the second poll I've seen this week where she has been tied with Donald Trump in Georgia. Michigan, she's up 11. I would take this one here with a grain of salt because a lot of Michigan polls have been a lot closer than this one is concerned. But still, this poll right here from Bloomberg, up 11, absolutely huge. Nevada up 2. And this one really opened my eyes, only down 2 in North Carolina, of usually a almost certain red state. And now with that state being in play, that's even bigger for her. Trump can take solace in the fact that he's still up 4 in Pennsylvania. That's a state that, again, I think that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania might be the 2 states it comes down to win this election. And if anybody wants me to do my prediction on the Electoral College, and we'll probably do a deep dive on the Electoral College and thoughts on that, that versus, a ranked choice voting system or other voting systems, we'll probably do a deep dive. But if anybody wants me to do a little 10-15 minute video on my just prediction of how the Electoral College is going to go, shoot me a comment, shoot me a DM, let me know. I'd be happy to do so in one of these shows in the future. But as you can see here, yeah, Pennsylvania, Trump up 4, Wisconsin, Harris up 2, and then Harris up 4 in Arizona when you consider all 5 candidates here. So a lot of polls that are really going Kamala's way right now, and it's going to be interesting when we get to the DNC and if there is a debate between Trump and Harris, how that will change things. We are now under 100 days until Election Day. Again, just crazy how fast time flies. And then for anybody who is a sports fan out there but hasn't had a chance to check, wanted to go ahead and do a update here on the medal count for the Olympics. Again, I've been watching as much as possible. There's been so much today. I was catching handball, soccer, basketball. The U.S. Men's national basketball team took down South Sudan earlier. The U.S. has 30 medals right now. They are first in the medal count. Second place right behind them is the host country of France. They're at 26. And France is tied for second in gold medals with 8. China is leading gold with 9. They're third in the medal count at 19. The United States, 13 silvers and 12 bronzes, including a bronze in men's gymnastics the other night, and then women's gymnastics taking a gold last night. A huge comeback for Simone Biles and the women's gymnastics team. So had to sneak some sports into here as well. Anybody who has watched me or pay attention to me knows I'm a huge sports fan, so wanted to incorporate that in the show at least today in some way, shape, or form. And then I wanted to end today with this funny issue so everybody could get a little bit of laugh before we get going and before I get going on vacation. This is an article I saw in Yahoo Finance last week. I actually meant to include this on last week's show, but again, last week's show was so long and so much going on that I had to hold it off to this week. Gen Z job seekers should be, quote, willing to do anything, says Squarespace CMO who cold called firms from the phone book for her first role. Getting a job is hard right now. Ask any Gen Z grad who's at risk of becoming unemployable. But Squarespace's chief marketing officer, Ken Jill Mather, says that's long been the case, which is why she had to get creative when she was starting out nearly 20 years ago. The New York-based exec has worked in the elusive worlds of tech and fashion, climbing up the ranks of Condé Nast, Saks, Fifth Avenue, and Foursquare to the C-suite at $6 billion software service provider Squarespace. And there was a quote in here that I wanted to bring up that was just laughable. It was higher up in the article last week, so bear with me here while I find it. Basically what she was saying is that Gen Z should be willing to basically take any amount of money, or should be willing to basically work for free, um, before actually getting a full-time job or getting your foot in the door. I wish I could find it. This article has changed. Here it goes right here. Quote, I was willing to work for free. I was willing to work any hours they needed, even on evenings and weekends. I was not focused on traveling. You really have to just be willing to do anything, any hours, any pay, any type of job, just really remain open. It's just funny because you have these CEOs who are absolute billionaires that are making, tons of money, that are trying to, crap on Gen Z people or younger people and say, hey, you should do whatever it takes, and trying to scold them for, not taking a job where they're getting paid a fair amount of money. So just wanted to bring that up. Wish I was able to bring up the full quote from her, but again, it looks like the article has changed in the last week. I recommend anybody to look that up a little bit further for sure. And there's a lot of more funny quotes out there from CEOs when it comes to that issue too. But that is pretty much going to do it for today's show. Again, like I mentioned, a little bit of a shorter show than usual. Next week when we come back, we're going to have a few important things to talk about. Again, I might get into the Electoral College. I definitely plan on getting into talking about Ticketmaster and Live Nation and how they screw over smaller artists. That's an issue that I've been passionate about and wanting to talk about for a while. So stay tuned. There'll be a lot on that. I have a couple other things I'm going to be working on for this channel over my vacation over this next week. But again, I appreciate everybody for still stay, the support everybody's given me. Again, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed yet, please click subscribe. If anybody has any recommendations on things that they would like to see on this channel, or changes they'd like to see, or any additions to this show, please let me know. I'm always open to any feedback, and definitely willing to make this the best it possibly can. So that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Liberation Hour. Again, a huge thanks to Josh Von Pohle for coming on, and a huge thanks to everybody for tuning in. Until next time, this has been Aaron. Take care. Peace out.